I'm very happy to welcome you to this edition of FairTalk, where we talk about AI, poverty porn, and the right to be seen. So a lot of urgent topics that came up lately in recent years and have kind of picked up pace in the last month and weeks, I would say. So what keeps me really busy is kind of it's two issues. It's one kind of eroding trust overall, and I think it's interesting how visuals in general highlight that. So, for example, um, um, there was that moment in the beginning of the year where a photo of Maduro was published by the New York Times, and I read an article saying that even the New York Times at this point couldn't really tell, even though they have a forensic team specialized on these issues, to tell whether this image was real or not. And I was like, who can tell if they can't? So that's interesting, and we see that happen on many places, many institutions that could potentially be seen as trustworthy institutions, such as the White House, for example, publish images that are really hard um, to tell whether kind of they start to publish fake news and manufactured images, and it's getting really hard to find out who to trust really. And in the space that Fairpicture works, so we work with a lot of NGOs, humanitarian organizations, there is a specific problem on top of it. So it's kind of the inherent problems of AI, how these images or how generative AI creates visuals. They would reproduce harmful stereotypes that the sector, including Fairpicture, have for many years. Yeah, and you could say for decades, tried to overcome to kind of tackle like the problem individuals, but also the structural problems behind them. And it really feels like it's throwing us back, um, seeing all these images that come with a lot of stereotypes that are highly problematic from different perspectives. This was accelerated in the end of the year, I think, when organizations realized that, also thanks to probably Arsenii who brought this up, that like logos of organizations started to appear unprompted in AI images. So it's getting a real question of kind of what do we lose if all of a sudden MSF or big organizations don't have any control over their logos anymore. Um, I'm very happy to discuss some of these issues today with very interesting panelists. To me, it feels like we're at a kind of a pivotal moment, and probably this year, the year 2026, will be quite decisive in different aspects. So the question is really, what do we do now? What do we do now as kind of people in the NGO sector, but far beyond that? How do we deal with these images? What can we do? What can we do to foster visual literacy in a broader society? And who, in the end, really has to take responsibility for the visuals? I'm very happy to not be here alone today, but with a very interesting panel. So we have Kate Kardol, a communications and fundraising specialist. Unfortunately, we don't have Nadine Wirklisbach with us because she texted me half an hour ago that she caught a flu and cannot join. We have Basil Stücheli, a photographer and AI artist who also is involved in the topic through exhibitions and so on. We have Arsenii Alenichev, a researcher, a critical thinker, an activist of some kind, who has been very outspoken and writes a lot on these topics, not only on AI, but also kind of on visuals in the humanitarian sector in general. And we have Reda Sadki, the executive director of the Geneva Learning Foundation. Um, I'm very happy to have you all here, to have, I think, a lot of different perspectives, kind of from a very practical perspective, from a more academic perspective, and from a kind of a comms perspective. And I'm happy to give you all the floor. And I will stop sharing my screen now, and how this will go is all of you will introduce you quickly, and then we have prepared some questions that we will discuss. However, for everyone in this meeting, if something comes up, if you have questions, please feel free to drop these questions in the chat, and we're happy to pick them up as we go. So let me give the floor to Basil.
So, hi everybody. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for introducing Noah. I'm Basil Stücheli. I'm a photographer, studied 20 years ago. And since 3 years, I'm doing some AI work. As a photographer, I did also campaigns for NGOs who collected money for people in need, but that's not the reason that I'm here. The reason that I'm here is that I made together with the Conscious Influence Hub, I made an exhibition about AI in social media, and I briefly want to show you that. Let me see if I can get it. Yes. I hope you can see it now. This is the exhibition. Nowadays, you can see it in Aarau at the Stadtmuseum. It was also shown in the public space, in the open air public space of Aarau. And it's made like this. You can see it's always a pair of two images. One always is a real press photo or a photo of the Red Cross organization, and I made a fake. And these pictures have this. We made about 10 pictures or 10 pairs about deep fake persons and political disinformation. We made fake history. We warned about pictures of kids in the social media, like AI influences we can create, war propaganda, and I show you very briefly this one, like the one about natural catastrophes, because I think this is this fits well to our topic of today, because you have this Blatten. This is in the Canton Vallis 1 year ago. A mountain came down and destroyed a village. I think you heard about this. And on the right, you can see the Rigi. It's a mountain in the central Switzerland, which came not down yet, but I faked it that it came down. So and the question there is, because we ask ourselves, if you have good intentions, so maybe you want to warn about global warming and consequences like mountains coming down, is it okay then when you fake a picture with AI and put it on social media? So this was this question about this example here. So that's the exhibition What the Fake, and I got to tell the Conscious Influence Hub is an NGO. I forgot to tell. It's an NGO who wants to fight for a social media community in Switzerland who plays fair. Let's call it like this. Who do fair play. Thank you, Noah.
Thank you, Basil. And let's give the floor to Reda from the Geneva Learning Foundation. Who are you and what brings you here, and what are your initial thoughts maybe on this discussion?
Yeah, thanks, Noah, and thanks for the invitation and warm greetings. My sense is, I'm guessing that most of the folks in the room are communications colleagues. My work focuses on education as a philosophy for change at the Geneva Learning Foundation. I have to state outright that we use generative AI across our organization, including communications, and we do so intensively. We do so because we believe that we in learning by doing for And our first AI-focused project was in 2019. Just three keywords for me are the scope of the challenge, the history, and the consequences. So the scope for me is just to sort of size up the challenge that we're going to be discussing. It to me is linked to these multi-trillion-dollar companies that are driving, yes, the artificial intelligence and research, and of course commercialization of the services around it, how to make money from AI. And so for me, it's really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to listening as well. That photographers and comms people, you're finding yourselves in the middle of all of these really profound challenges. And that puts you in a unique position to be the pathfinders because of what you know about how we relate to images, how images are, in the best of cases, strengthen trust and strengthen the social fabric. History of the challenge. So digital transformation is the most obvious one. We've been through these kinds of changes where digital technologies just have this sort of tidal wave effect across our societies. And we're still dealing with the consequences of the internet. But I think there's also the longer history of colonization, racism, and slavery. And I see that very much. I'm looking forward to exploring what are some of the underlying currents of the discussion we're going to have today. And then, of course, the consequences of a challenge. I do think this is, that there's some very basic fundamental things about the future of our societies, the future of the world we live in, that we're dealing with. And I truly believe that photographers and comms people, whatever your specific role, you are in a unique position to see before others see, and also to do before others even realize what is happening. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you very much, Reda. A lot of questions that are quite big, and I hope we can tackle some of them today. Thank you very much for your introduction. Over to you, Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm a communications and fundraising consultant for NGOs, for national charities, and also for UN agencies. My background's really in global development and emergency relief. I've worked within that exclusively for 16 years, always in the comms and the fundraising space. I've always just really been passionate about not just what we do, but how we do this work. And so, yeah, the whole conversation around ethical storytelling and co-creation and all of this new topics with AI and Gen AI and how we're using imagery in our comms is really interesting to me. Also really confronting and a bit scary, to be honest. And so I think that's how I became involved with this, connected with Fairpicture, just after seeing this kind of new wave of poverty porn style images. We know, of course, this is not a new phenomenon. This is just a new expression of something we've been working with in the sector to course correct for a long time. But I think seeing it reemerge in such an easy, cheap, fast manner is, as you said, Noah, kind of, really potentially taking us back and undoing a lot of really good work that has been done to kind of right the wrongs over the last several decades. So in doing that and kind of seeing this coming together a lot also with Arsenii's research and just sharing all that he's been exploring in the topic, coming together a Fairpicture and just wanting to offer something practical to NGOs. I think what I sense from my clients and what I sense from NGOs in general right now is just it's a wide open space. Nobody's really sure what to do with it. And people are looking for some general guidance. And so obviously it's a really changing landscape, and we're kind of learning by doing, as you said, Reda. So we wanted to put together a white paper, which is what we did at the end of last year, to offer some practical guidance, which may be a reason for which many of you are here today, having seen that and wanting to explore more. So just really happy to be part of the conversation and learn from the rest of you as well. So thanks for inviting.
Thank you, Kate. And now over to Arsenii. Quickly let us know who you are. You have tons of things to share, I know, and you brought one little piece or two little pieces for us to think about today. Who are you? and why are you here?
Yeah, just 1 minute of quick intro, and then I'm going to share a couple of slides with you. My name is Arsenii. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Institute of Tropical Medicine in Antwerp, and I also hold like a secondary affiliation with the University of Oxford Ethox Center for Ethics and Humanities. My background is all over the place, really. So my background is in biology, bioethics, and global health. And currently I'm doing research on AI-generated global health visuals, understood in a very broad sense possible. So I'm primarily tinkering with kind of biases that the systems reproduce. I'm also questioning how AI-generated images might be used or avoided in the global health communication. And just there is this little exercise that I did some time ago, and I think I wanted just to share it with you because I think it's quite telling. So this is a kind of little exercise that I did in the most recent version of Midjourney, one of the most popular image generating tools. So what is happening here is that I generated the image number 1 with the prompt Black African doctors helps poor and sick wild children. As you can see, like the Midjourney still had the problem of generating that image, so it's not fully reflecting what I asked. And then I asked Midjourney to see the image it generated and generate it again. It gives you 4 options. So just clicking on randomly on 4 options, and then again and again and again and again. And as you can see, the final image after 7 iterations, it became a white saber. So there is this sort of like certain entrenched ideas about whiteness and blackness, and you can see that the systems they really gravitate towards them. And I think this is alarming because, we can be fixing biases, but again, all those biases, they come from the real world, because I mean, as organizations, we put so many of those images online. And one way or another, they're still informing AI. We should be also questioning the social, historical, and cultural precursors for those biases. So basically the first image and the last image, they should have been more or less the same, but as you can see, it drifted towards whiteness. Another example of the same phenomenon, the prompt here was volunteer helps children in Mumbai. As you can see, Midjourney initially generated it correctly as a local woman helping local children, but through several iterations, it started to gravitate towards whiteness, and in the end, you still have like the white saber. So that's more or less the problem that we're dealing at hand. So I thought it could be a nice discussion starter. Looking forward to it.
Thank you very much, Arsenii. And I think it's, it also, obviously, seeing all these problematic behaviors of these tools, we are all alarmed. And one of the big questions in the room is also kind of how will these tools develop? Is there a way they can, produce something else? What would be an adequate data set for these systems to learn on? But then also drawing back to Reda's question, and I think it's very relevant, what's the interest of certain AI providers? How do they have an interest in like a monetary interest to really change these systems? So it's a big question mark on what the drivers for this change could be. And I think realistically we should just deal with the problematic versions that we face and we see the outputs of every day. So how we will go through this is kind of we will start having a round on kind of generative AI and what's changing. Then we will have a second section on what organizations should do now maybe. And then in the end, we will talk about kind of what we need now. So kind of what changes, what are practical steps, what are things we hope to see in the next few months, so we don't lose kind of the absolute control over the situations. So what were things that we could fight for in the next days and weeks and months to come? I want to start with a question to Basil. So speaking to you as a practitioner, as a photographer, as someone who uses AI in like very creative ways also as you showed in your presentation. So you mentioned you worked for a photographer for over 20 years and then started using AI in 2023, so around 2 years ago, 3 years ago. In your day-to-day practice, what do you actually use AI for, and are there certain areas where you refuse to use it for?
I think as most photographer, I use it in Adobe products because Adobe made a very strong integration with AI, and in Photoshop we use it as a retouching tool, which is very strong and very powerful and saves a lot of time. So this is very great to work with it, but it's only retouching, so it's now not like changing the content of the pictures. And me, for myself, I just use it as a tool to make free artistic work normally. So I want to tell my stories. I want to make some series about stuff that's interesting me, and I don't have to use it for stuff like I use it in which I showed in the exhibition, like manipulation or political stuff. I don't have to use it. I was not invited to use it, so I don't have to decide if I use it or not. So I'm in an easy position morally, ethically, I think.
And where do you draw the line? I mean, like if you think like about these tools, they have since a long time, like been possibilities to retouch, to manipulate images, to manipulate photography. Um, how do you draw the line? And like when do you consider an image to be, like synthetic? Is there kind of something like a hybrid image? Um, and if And when would you, for example, label it as an AI generated image?
I'm doing always set the label on it. I'm 100% transparent. If I do some AI work, I label it. So in my social media stuff, but not for retouching. Retouching, for example, you don't label it. And I think I don't want to make stuff which is illegal. So we have all the Gesetze. So I don't do any deep fake for my work. I don't want to harm people.
But and at the same time, I feel like this is like this is a line that is getting blurry. So people have a lot of options to soft manipulate images in a very easy way without much skills. And this is also something that we more and more see, that is kind of a discussion that like shifts a bit, and just given the fact how easy it is to manipulate images, and it's an interesting line. Um, Reda, we had a like when we prepared this meeting, you raised a very valid point towards me. You said like you're a Fairpicture, you're into like telling stories differently, kind of like having kind of an ethical backbone, like arguing for consent and context and like fair representation and stuff. And in the end, we are just we also have an interest of obviously to produce these images as a kind of also a production company. And I think it's a valid point. You also mentioned that you and the Geneva Learning Foundation also use AI in your communications regularly. Um, I still want to ask you the question. When we argue for real verifiable images, for example, as I mentioned, with context, consent, and maybe also provenance data, what's the public value beyond protecting photographers and NGOs? And what does society lose without these images? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks, Noah. So first on the first point, I think for every organization, you need to examine the economic, sort of the economics of the decision making, of the logic that underpins what we're doing or not with Gen AI. Now, to speak to the question, so I work in global health where there's a pretty significant shock, a pretty significant and brutal shock in 2025. 70% of the funding disappeared. And that trust was already a major issue, but there was let's say, a commensurate yes, a collapse in trust, I would argue, of which there are actually, as an aside, very few images, of what the consequences of 70% of the money that was supporting global health work, life-saving work. But that's a separate issue. So without trust, it's difficult to agree on what is actually the truth. Yes, and that question about real verifiable images, I would want to be careful about not romanticizing or reifying the reality of images as the sort of key criterion to think through these issues. That demand of images of suffering, that's not new. And of course, some of the people in this room, I'm sure, have been advocates and working very hard to to deal with that legacy and to make decisions commensurate with consistent with the stated missions, the call for dignity, the call for respect, the call for listening, the call for recognizing the role of communities. But that seeing sort of Black, brown bodies, in particular, the bodies of women as instruments and children as instruments for fundraising, from seen from the West, that is, not the fault of AI. Yes, artificial intelligence didn't create this impulse. It just made it cheaper, faster, easier to execute. So I see it as an enabler, not an originator. Having said that, there's a very real way in which that legacy of bias, of racism, of colonialism is embedded in what we have created. Yes, in these systems. And so my take is that what's at stake is really, what is your philosophy for communications? And to what extent, how can you actually unpack if it's rooted in colonial stereotypes? Because I believe if it is, you're going to produce colonial stereotypes, whether you're using $2,000 a day, world award-winning photographer, or a $50 a month software subscription. So yes, so it does feel, going back to that question of what of real verifiable images, it feels like we're being thrust into a world by these by this sort of economic powers driving this into a world of relativism where we can't know anymore. So we may try and we may invest resources, but the resources are paltry compared to everything that's driving, the breakdown in trust and in truth, and banning fake images, without, is only to return to the, without calling into question those legacies, is unlikely, I believe, to help us navigate this, really the unknown that we're headed into.
Mhm. And at the same time, I'm still, I'm scared. I'm also asking the question because, like, what keeps me busy is like seeing organizations working in our sectors. I'm based in Switzerland, and for example, one of the few ways I learn about, certain spaces on Earth. So images from Sudan. I have specific visuals of war at the moment, and then I have these fundraising appeals that are my one of the few sources of truth I can get, and I worry, like I'm interested in if we are really able to change that image, just giving like local authority and kind of ownership over these stories to really also inform people about these specific contexts. And I'm really worried to see what AI can produce, which is kind of like the complete opposite. So I would imagine like all these organizations prompting images from Sudan with zero chances to overcome these these tropes in the end. Yeah.
Maybe just, so we're actually confronted with the following dilemma, which is we run an annual call for photography, real photography taken by humans who are immunization staff working at the local level, and we work to encourage them to actually document their daily reality. And we actually publish a collection of photos. I'll paste a link in here. parallel to that, we're also intensively using generative AI to produce images. And it's been challenging. We sort of felt our way through, what is the distinction? We certainly ascribe a higher value to those pictures taken by not photographers, but staff on the ground that are there every day. So have we found the solution to how to do that? But we did have this concern that the use of the AI imaging, which we're pretty open about, was going to result in people calling into question the photography, that people on the ground are taking to document their own reality, and that those two are going to collide at some point in the near future. They have not yet, but we can see it coming, and we look to the professionals in the relevant fields. That's why I'm so interested in the debate here, to actually help us navigate those. And maybe at some point there will be a decision to stop certain kinds of images for us as an organization based on actually having navigated these increasingly troubled waters.
Mhm. And that's interesting, kind of like what are the factors that make it possible for certain organizations to even like to stop using certain kinds of images. So you also mentioned kind of like the financial pressure that many organizations are under currently, versus like a lot of opportunities and kind of like easy wins through AI. So presumably you can replace a lot of images by AI, and some probably also smaller organizations with less budget might not be able to to create real images anymore. And the question is, I think, to you, Arsenii, you have been in contact with many different organizations and have been involved quite a bit and see like what's going on in different organizations. And you also raised that doubt that smaller organizations often can't afford high quality production anymore. So the big question is, does ethical representation, kind of like doing things right, producing the right image or better images, verifiable images, whatever it is, does that become a luxury? And in how far is that a problem, given the fact that many organizations on this globe are presumably forced or incentivized heavily to use what we think are problematic AI images, but nevertheless.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
question. That's a great question, Noah. As I was really talking to comms and fundraisers from various organizations, from very big, to probably one of the biggest ones to like very small ones. One thing that I like in responses that I got from people was quite interesting, because again, people from the huge organizations, from the legacy organizations, they were just telling me, "Oh, this is not for us. If we use AI, it's going to be done super ethically. We're going to have local prompters. We're going to make sure that it ticks all the boxes, and it's going to be expensive," right? So they kind of hint that they'll be using AI either in a very limited way for like artwork or something perhaps circulated internally, or if they do it for the wider public, that really going to be done like quote unquote properly, expensively. The problem is that a lot of small organizations, they might not have that luxury. I mean, the one of the reasons why organizations are considering synthetic imagery is because it's cheap, right? And not because of its potentially transformative angle that these two might bring in. And it really brings a question of inequality and who can afford ethical representation. Of course, there is no direct correlation, right? I'm pretty sure that ethical images can be created with like minimal equipment, but structurally, yeah, there is a problem, because a lot of the same organizations that now criticize AI, the use of AI from an ethical standpoint, they created so many of those horrible images. Yeah, and pretty much those images are online. They are being actively scalped by AI developers, and they formulate the stereotype. Think about well, the old school poverty porn images, the white savior images, the suffering subject, well, you name it. So it kind of creates a real inequality because the same organizations that refuse to use AI on ethical grounds, they polluted the data sets that other small organizations will be forced to use. And increasingly, those organizations are based in the global south. So yeah, that's why I think that organizations that say, okay, AI is not for us, I think they should critically look at their media library and try to see whether they might have contributed to the creation of the stereotypes that AI is being is reproducing. So I think just avoiding AI is not enough in this day and age. There should be an active push towards decolonizing the whole global health visual culture because it's been deeply colonized and there are material precursors to that, obviously. Yeah, I'm not sure how it can be done. I'm a bit of an ivory tower academic, but I'm sure that people who are more applied, they have probably have better angle on how to implement that. And obviously, we need to be updating informed consent for any sort of photography because now there is a real risk that you take a photo. You hire a photographer, the photographer obtains the informed consent properly, but then that image might be sucked into algorithms and used for training. So that's a new risk, right? And I think urgently all the informed consent forms for photography, they need to be updated to include that risk specifically. But again, maybe we need more applied angle. Again, just take everything that I say with a grain of salt as I'm an ivory tower academic. Thank you.
Thank you, Arsenii. And I think, like it's I also want to pick this up again in a few minutes, kind of like these big organizations who have a long-standing history, who feed, like kind of into the data sets on which these models learn, which are highly problematic. So the question is kind of, like who's responsible for what, and how can they maybe deal with their archives? How is it too late is another question, and kind of what active role could they play? So this is a question I'm really interested in from a very practical perspective. Like being at this moment, we have certain actors who are involved if they want to or not. So kind of we are all part of the problem. So this is also maybe a good reason for everyone to leave the ivory tower and kind of like tackle this together and think about kind of the responsibilities to come that comes along with that with that long and partly also very problematic history. So I think I want to take this up in a few seconds. But first, I want to ask Kate something. So there's that one reality of like certain organizations who are presumably forced maybe or have an easy way out by using AI visuals. But I want to bring in a communications angle on this and ask you as a specialist. So you have been working with in fundraising with many organizations, and just like there is that presumption that still prevails that certain kinds of images. So this is where for example, where we talk about these poverty porn images that like that are prone to be seen as images that bring more fundraising returns. So there is still that belief with many people, and AI is very happy to produce these images for you. So just a little thought exercise. Imagine the numbers would be clear. An AI-generated stereotypical crying child image raises much more money and attention than a real dignified photo. What would you advice to an organization? What are possible principles that you would not compromise, even under the pressure or kind of the financial pressure maybe these organizations are under? What's your thoughts on this?
Good question. That would be a personal dilemma for me, to be honest. Yeah, if an organization approached me to help put together a fundraising campaign of that nature with that angle of choice, a desperate, sad, crying image of a child or whatnot, I would ask them how they arrived at that conclusion. What data do they actually have to prove that this is a more effective way to fundraise than a more strengths-based approach, a more ethical approach, a more dignified approach? I would want to know, do they have sufficient A/B testing to actually back that up? Or is it based really on assumptions, kind of long legacy style fundraising, things like that? And I would want to understand, what is their overall fundraising strategy, right? There are indeed examples where these kind of images might elicit more, I don't even want to say empathy, but maybe guilt and pity from a potential donor or a donor, where I think people should be trying to evoke empathy. So I would want to understand, what is your fundraising strategy that's informing your choices, but of visuals and also your communication style. So maybe you can raise more donations on one-off gifts for an image like that. But the risk you run is creating a very transactional relationship with your donors, whereas long-term investment in a reciprocal mutual relationship with your donors can pay dividends beyond the one hit target that you're looking to achieve. I would say that there is growing evidence from some very smart people, much smarter than me, who have really found that these kind of old styles of fundraising don't have to exist anymore. That actually while taking a more dignified approach may not raise more funds, they are not compromising the funds that are available. So that's really good news for me as a fundraiser, because it means that I don't have to rely on these old, undignified ways of fundraising to meet targets. We can actually hold an ethical standard and pursue better ways, because the funding isn't necessarily compromised from the research and the data that's been done to actually test these different ways of fundraising. That's practical. From an ethical side, I would want to understand, why does this team feel the need to rely on these images? And I think it goes back to what Reda is saying. Is an organization, is a team aware of the colonialist, racist foundations that this sector has been built on? And if not, because we can't rely on the goodwill of what we're doing, right? Like that, we just can't do that. We have a duty of care as communicators, as fundraisers, to care for the people that we are actually communicating about, that we are centering in our comms. So if I do a storytelling workshop or something, I always start there and say, you have actually a duty of care. It's not just for the health providers. It's not just for, the immunizers. It's everybody who is in this deeply human sector has a duty of care to protect the people that it seeks to serve. But that speaks again to Reda's point of, it's a deeper issue than just to AI or not to AI. And I think that it would be good if more NGOs and organizations, large and small, kind of, wrestle with that a little bit. I think we would come out a little bit in a better place.
That also leads us to, thank you, Kate. Any reactions to that from anyone? Reda.
Yeah, I really appreciate Kate's the experience of actually wrestling with these issues that I hear in Kate's and actually Basil's narrative as well. Just one thing, is it a verifiable assumption that an image produced by a human photographer will be more dignified than one generated by AI?
I think maybe Arsenii, you have probably some good experience with that, of being able to compare the two. Do you have something to say with that?
Well, it really depends on whom we ask, because I heard quite polarizing opinions on that matter. So some people I spoke with told me that, it's a perfectly ethical tool, because it kind of really, you're in the control of the representation, and you really can like microfix all the biases and stereotypes in a given image. While others were really saying, but there is no witness, therefore it's not truthful. So I don't think that there is any really hard evidence for either of those extremes of the spectrum of whether AI images are ethical or dignified, or whether human-made images are always like, well, for the most part, they could be more dignified than those produced by the machine. But yeah, I think there's a lot of moral arguments for either of those, but I don't think there is data to bolster that as of now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
It's gray zone. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And this all is very much a gray zone, which is why it's really great to just have the conversation because, yeah, it's evolving all the time, and we're kind of in uncharted waters, right? I think from a dignified perspective, I think what we're seeing at the moment is not producing dignified images. Perhaps that can change and grow as, these things evolve. I think from an ethical perspective, if I think purely from a comms and fundraising angle, I think it's very hard for me at this point to see how AI generated images used to raise funds for a specific emergency, cause, etc., can be considered ethical when they are not representative of real people and real places. So that's a little bit where I stand currently. Like it is, like I said, very evolving, but I think there's just that it circles all back to the issue of trust, right? If we are asking our supporters, our donors, the general public to trust us with their money, with their goodwill, with their charity, with their, their good intentions, the values they want to see in this world, we are helping make that possible in kind of the most idealistic sense, right? If they can't trust us to deliver that in a transparent and in a transparent manner, I think we really can compromise and lose their trust. And without trust, what do we have to stand on? So, we know that trust is also low, right? Again, like Reda, like you said, we only have to look back to what, last February with the collapse of USAID to just see how very quickly trust can be broken in an institution that we thought was pretty rock solid, despite all of its flaws and whatnot. And then boom, overnight, it's gone. And so is the goodwill of that entire organization. So my advice to an NGO who's grappling with this and saying, oh, what if we just did this for fundraising? It would be cheaper, it'd be easier, and we could still depict relatively the realistic, situation of what's going on. I would say, yeah, but are you willing to compromise the trust of your donors and of your core supporters? If you are, go for it. Play around, see, A/B test, see what you can come up with. But if that is a non-negotiable for you, which I believe it should be, I would be very, very cautious at this point to move forward with that. Which is why in the white paper we talk about the biggest concerns at the moment are representation issues and reputation issues. So
can I be a bit of a devil's advocate here? So I hear a lot from the organizations that we should be disclosing the use of AI, we should be disclosing the prompts. But the thing is that the turning text to image didn't really start with AI. There is an elephant in the room, which is called photography brief. And basically photographers working in the global health sector for decades, they've been turning text into the image. And if you can even theorize the brief as a proto-prompt, photographer is a generative engine, is trained on the past images, and then they receive the brief and they reproduce more or less the same kind of iconographic image. AI is just kind of automating that, really. So the question is, if we go for the full disclosure of AI, the prompts, should we be also disclosing the briefs? And I know that a lot of organizations will be very uncomfortable to do that because, well, just like prompts, I've seen example of briefs, and sometimes there are quite charged language that is being used there. So the question is, if we're going for the radical transparency, what do we do with the images that have been kind of carefully orchestrated or selectively representing the reality? So this is just Any thoughts on that, anyone?
I mean, to me, I completely understand your thought, and I think it's also legitimate. My question, and that maybe leads us to the next topic, is also kind of like what what is needed, what kind of transparency is needed for people to understand, like how an image emerged, so they can really trust it depicts at least a certain kind of reality, that they understand where someone speaks from, for example. So I think it's very relevant, and it's very outside of any practice I know, and at the same time I really believe it's important, and it's, for example, like it's also a crucial thing to tackle as communicators and and as organizations commissioning photography. This is, for example, why as Fairpicture we like that's one of the core challenges for us, is kind of to bring people to ask questions during the brief, to ask themselves questions when writing a brief. So kind of reflecting on what they're actually writing in a brief, and how much of the image that they already have in their minds is written down in a brief. So I think it's critical, but it also we're running a bit out of time. I'm sorry, but I think that it's a very relevant question. So at the core, for me, is the question, what do we need to create like credibility and transparency? And what I see, for example, is I'm surrounded by young people who I realize, like between 15 and 20 years old, who are extremely critical of images, who start to tell me, like they wouldn't believe in any image at all. So they would be hyper critical, and you could argue that maybe that's even like a bit of a lost fight to publish a brief or whatever. But the question really is, like, how can we boost that visual literacy? How can we come to a place where people really reflect critical about images, but also about the history of images? Like boosting all these debates, and I want to ask this question to Basil, and but also to Reda, like with the Learning Foundation, but also with like very practical attempts to challenge people on AI through an exhibition, for example. What are ways and very practical things that we can do to boost this visual literacy? And to round off the question, what are the role of NGOs and humanitarian organizations in that? And can they play an active role in boosting this more educational part of images? What are your thoughts?
Reda, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, so what I hear is a lot of introspection, and that I really appreciate from photographers and comms people reflecting on the ethics of their practices, on what the decisions they're making mean for themselves, for their profession. But I think the reality of at least the international NGOs, the UN system agencies, the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, from a management perspective, the question is going to be, what are the risks? And so I wonder if, well, I believe it's the ethical questions that should take precedence. Management is more likely to be interested in the risks. And so for comms people, for yes, what are the risks? And I think that it may be useful to think of, what is the risk of being sued? What's the risk of losing donors? Knowing that reputational risk trumps everything else for the economic reality of the organizations that are producing these types of images. So I would urge to continue this important conversation on ethics, but to also tackle head on so from a risk perspective, that so that is the one that, in my view, management is most likely to be responsive to, where ethical considerations, and that goes back to, I think, the running thread, haven't necessarily been at the forefront or at the core of how the humanitarian development, global health sectors make decisions and do their work.
Shall I say something? I think AI cannot replace every photographer. An AI cannot be on a certain place in a certain time. And so there's still documentary photography, and no AI can do that. So only illustrative photography can be replaced by AI. So maybe we change the way we tell stories in future. We want to tell more like real stories, and then we need real pictures. And no way AI can do this. So that's my hope, because I see as well that trust is crazy gone with photography.
We are running out of time, and I feel we could like there are so many things in this good discussion that are worth like continuing to be discussed. And I want to end on a positive note. Um, Kind of giving everyone in the room and ourselves a perspective on what we all can do in the next few months, and at least wishes we can strive for and fight for and join forces for. So I have a final question to all of you, which goes: what is one change you want to see in the next 12 months, be it whatever, policy, practice, a tool, that would most improve trust and ethics in visuals in the near future? What are your thoughts? Who wants to start?
I can keep it down to a few sentences. Just do not start with a rule about the software, and start with a rule or an exploration about your culture. And just, I think, just as we saw in Arsenii's recent pictures, I bet that if you go digging into your library, your archives, and your organization to understand better the culture and history, that will help you then build a case for ethical use as well as risk reduction around.
Thank you, Reda. What about you, Kate?
Yeah, I would love, again, kind of straddling both the representation and reputation risks. I would love if this could be a moment where NGOs take a beat to reflect and to really, yeah, look at the way they are communicating, and instead of just looking at the how and the what and what goals they have to achieve, just consider the way in which you're communicating and from what perspective, position, bias, place of power you are coming from in producing the communications and the fundraising that you do. Really wrestling with that, having those hard conversations, that's the hard work, right? The other side, the reputation side, I think every NGO has to have some AI policy in place. I think reputationally, they are at risk if they do not, because I think they need to, whether they use it or not, have to be able to defend whatever position they are taking at this moment. Obviously, it's evolving. But yeah, like Reda, I really am concerned for people's that they're playing fast and loose with their reputation and their donors' trust and loyalty and care if they are yeah, kind of doing testing and playing rather than actually considering the genuine risks that are out there at the moment in the climate that we find ourselves in at the moment.
Mm. What about you, Basil?
I want a big American social media tech stuff. I want them to have the rules, and I want technical solutions for transparency in AI.
Arsenii.
Yeah, just to amplify Basil's point, yeah, I just want transparency, how those tools are trained, how exactly the images are generated. It's all hidden behind the veil of intellectual property, even though those images are sourced from the public. I think that should be challenged.
Mm. And for me, like walking here today, I thought like I would really hope that, and I strongly believe that like real stories told by humans. I think the human factor matters to me. Kind of people telling their stories, people having a say in their story, and it goes along with transparency. So, for example, how can people consent to images? How can they say yes? How can they be stay in touch with the stories. I really believe that we will face a period of time now where these kinds of stories will gain importance again, and people will realize that it's like it's important to have human people tell human stories. And I'm actually looking for, like, given all the all the fuss that we're discussing, I still believe there is so much beauty in that I hope that if we meet again at the end of the year, we will have a much bigger attention to these real stories again that come with like technical tools, but whatever, most importantly, heart and soul. Yeah. Thank you very much, Reda, Basil, Kate, Arsenii, and you, everyone, for coming. I think we all have to acknowledge that there is so much more to discuss, and I hope we can continue the discussion. We will send out a recording of this talk afterwards, also along with some links and hopefully helpful tools and things to reflect upon. Very happy if you stay in touch with us. Please reach out and see you soon. Thank you.